Hello and welcome to the design session. These design sessions are to our community to get together and also to give a sneak peek of the upcoming speakers at the conference. Because, as you might know, the design conference from Business to Buttons is the 24th of May. The theme this year at the conference is movement. We have to keep moving, we have to keep changing, we have to do it in a cautious way. Because when we change within ourselves, within our organization or the whole society or the whole planet, we have to always keep thinking of the consequences. We have to keep thinking of the individuals. We have to keep thinking of the societies and the planet. So we have to spark change, but we have to do it in a sustainable way. Aarathi Krishnan specializes in humanitarian futures and strategic foresight. With more than 15 years of experience, she has worked with the UN, the Red Cross and the Red Crescent with humanitarian aid and development. Aarathi engages in research initiatives on inclusive technologies, AI and civil society futures with partners like the World Economic Forum. Terms like planetary health, new growth forms and decolonized and feminist futures are close to her. Aarathi will give us a speech at the From Business to Buttons conference in May, but we are so glad that she's here with us today. Welcome, Aarathi.
Thank you so much for having me. It's my pleasure.
And how are you? Do you feel all right?
I'm really well, really looking forward to this. And yeah, it's a beautiful sunny day. And yeah, happy to be here. How are you?
I'm fine. I feel a bit energetic, I think. So I have to try to stand still, but I'll work with that. We could start with that. Our theme of the conference is movement. What is putting you in movement? What makes you passionate about things you do, your job, so to speak?
Right. I mean, I've always been an aid worker. That's been almost 2 decades of my career has been working in that. And I really love what I do. I look at different types of risks. I love the analytical component of my work. I love the people I work with. I love the fact that I'm trying to understand root causes of crises. And yeah, so when I get out of bed, I'm really excited to get into work. It makes it feel worthwhile to me.
Oh, you gotta love what you do. That's a bullet point to remember. You have been working with the Red Cross, for the UN and the Red Crescent. Those are NGOs, non-governmental organizations.
They're international organizations and the United Nations system. So they're not NGOs. They're just a different beast. Yeah.
These kind of organizations, though, what are their purpose? How is it to work with them?
Yeah, so international organizations work alongside governments and alongside other international organizations and United Nations systems to support countries, whether that's to recover from a conflict or crises, whether it's to support countries to progress in their development economically, socially, etc. And then the United Nations systems, of course, is a legal structure that works alongside member states, meaning governments, in a very structured way to support all countries in their sustainable development achievements, and also in support when crises or conflict happens.
Say the UN. What did you do for them?
My most recent role with the UN has been with the United Nations Development Program here in New York. My mandate was to look at how we develop forward-looking analysis and forward-looking policy and be prepared for crises. So it's a process called risk anticipation for the Asia Pacific Bureau, meaning that, looking at how we do that with our country offices all across Asia Pacific and how we support government partners in Asia Pacific.
How was it?
It was really fantastic. It was a very intense process because it was really fundamentally about changing how we do a lot of things, moving from being reactionary, meaning that, we're just responding to something as it happens, to actually trying to get prepared in advance of it. So A lot of it was technical, a lot of it was research, a lot of it was influence and advocacy, and trying to convince, different stakeholders and constituents that we need to be better prepared in advance and stop being taken by surprise. We need to understand what is coming around the corner.
I guess that new technology and humanitarian work is part of your work.
Yeah.
How did that start? The concern
Yeah.
about ethics in new technology or innovation overall.
When I first started my career, I was very much working in the field in humanitarian aid, and sort of progressed upwards. And I think it was probably about 10 years ago, maybe, we started to look at how we use innovation, tech innovation, more effectively in our work. And that looked at how in back then was looking at how we used drones for disaster management. So when a cyclone hit or a typhoon hit or an earthquake, could we use drones to assess the damage a lot quicker than by sending people first? And very quickly, I guess, coming from the field and understanding the dynamics of what actually happens, and then seeing the use of technology that at the time hadn't been fully tested, and then just kind of thrown up in the air, really, because of good intentions, I realized that there was an inherent conflict about whether that technology was actually good or whether it could cause harm. And as I developed more in my career, that became a stronger testament. And then, so I decided to do a postgrad research fellowship with Harvard University. I did a dual research fellowship looking at the ethics of the use of technology in humanitarian assistance.
Very interesting. Of course, I can understand the thoughts of let's try this new technology because we need it now.
Yeah.
What would you say is the main? You talked about the risk of damage. What are the main risks that you have to think about before throwing in the drones, throwing in the I don't know?
Very often technology is designed in a different context in a different country and not in the context that it's ultimately going to be used. So while it was maybe designed for one purpose, we assume it's going to be as effective used for another purpose. However, your constituent base, the society, people working in that space, people living in that space have different realities. So in the design of your intervention, in the design of the technology, if you're not considering how this is going to be used in the ultimate context, and then also how it could be used for bad, what are the unintended consequences of using that particular type of technology? And that requires not just immediately coming up with a solution. We're so solution oriented. We want to solve everything. Before we stop and say, well, what is the problem we're actually trying to solve here? And how might this particular intervention manifest that problem over time?
But you also have to think about how people could do harm with it. Like you have to set up scenarios for Dr. Evil or,
Yeah, understanding the potential implications of something over time. Who might use it, who might benefit from it, who might be privileged from it, who might be dispossessed from it. And things like this matter. Back in 2015, everybody was really into drones at the time. And so we had all these, we used to call them cowboys that just arrived in a country post a disaster, and literally just throw the drones up in the air without asking for permission from local legal bodies, from air control, and in some spaces, throwing a drone up in the air can be, in a conflict situation, is actually really dangerous. Or in some other spaces, when they haven't really seen that type of technology before, it could be really culturally inappropriate in some spaces. And then fast forward, many years, technology, of course, has evolved so much. We're looking at biometrics for the use of on refugees to verify their identity and all of that. But what we see has happened with biometrics, it's now being used. If your identity is collected at one point, it can be used against you, and at another point wherever you end up on your journey for seeking asylum. So it is really trying to analyze the impact of that technology, how it might be used against people, and whether people feel that that technology is actually helping them, empowering them, making them feel safe, or if it's just another condition to be added that they have to sign up to just to get aid.
I'm curious, do you have some examples of when it didn't turn out well?
So, we can cast our eyes back to when Rohingya refugees, as they left Myanmar and went back to Bangladesh, had to be moved to Bangladesh. At some point, the government of Myanmar asked international agencies to give them the information, the identity information of the Rohingya refugees. And it was given back to Myanmar. And you have to stop and think about, well, these people were under persecution and they fled that government. And now we're giving back the information to that government without refugee consent, without their full informed consent. I mean, the second example, which is very recent in most of our memories, is when Afghanistan fell to the Taliban. And what you saw was a desperate chase from all Afghans to erase their digital profiles because it was a way of tracking them down. And it's an understanding why people's identity information was collected the way they did, how that information could fall to parties that don't necessarily have their best interests at heart, and how easily that information could be captured is an integral part of understanding how harm can evolve from particular types of technology.
And I guess that could also bounce back to the everyday life as me in Western Europe, when I use my different assistants and they recognize my voice and my face and my eyes and my I don't know what. Should we work on a basic level with these problems when it's not a crisis?
Right, but if you think about positionality, right? Like I don't think it's the level of safety we might feel in the spaces we exist in now, and giving up our biometrics, and we don't think too much about it. To associate that with the level of safety somebody in a vulnerable situation, and we don't even have to think about a crisis situation. One very real example, if I ask you as a white man, when you're at the airport and you're giving up your biometrics before you board your plane, you're going to say, yeah, that's fine, I don't really care, presumably. And then if you assume that I, as a brown woman, would feel that same way, and an immigrant would feel that same way, that's not true. I'm never comfortable with it, because I know that people with my skin color, and I live with a fair bit of privilege, but I still feel nervous. So it doesn't, in all our spaces, if you think of someone's undocumented, if someone's an immigrant, if someone has some level of minoritization put on them, and they have no choice but to give up that biometric data, do they feel safe to do so? And I think that's an assumption we make, that everybody, if you're designing this for use in Sweden, or you're designing this for use in Geneva, that everybody will feel the same level of safety, and that's not true.
From business to buttons.
At the conference, you will talk about lots of stuff, but maybe a sneak peek now. You will talk about some ethical principles to help inform humanitarian tech innovation.
Yeah.
Can you give us something about that? One principle, maybe? How you?
I strongly recommend for people to do like a futures harm assessment. So understanding how this particular technology might be used for bad over different timelines. So, in 1 year, what could this be used for? In 5 years, what could it be used for? In 10 years, what could it be used for? And to try and think of all the ways, pardon my French, but how all the ways shit can go wrong with that particular technology, because we just really don't know. We're playing in new fields at the moment, and that idea that we just need to stop and assess it so we can make informed decisions about how to proceed is a really big component of making sure we're putting guardrails in all our interventions.
Isn't this the kind of general principles that we should secure some scenarios or?
Done. But it's not done. Think about the last time a product was designed. It's usually trying to solve a problem today, but we don't. It's only been in recent years in some of the major tech companies, i.e., well, like Google, Microsoft, etc., now put in trust and safety experts, but humanitarian organizations do not do that. And we certainly do not stop and think about in what ways must we protect this. Must we protect the end user of this product from the worst intentions of human beings?
I guess you get this a lot, but if you do this, but you also have to do it and think globally on what crisis could occur globally in the next 15 years. Do people say that's impossible? That's too many? How do you? What do you say to them?
It's, what I often say is, the work that I do, we're trying to get decision makers to think about not just the problem in front of them today that they have to solve, but what could emerge downstream, right? At this point, most people or most decision makers will want to mitigate against problems today. And whatever happens down the line, that's just someone else's problem. Let's just push that downstream. And what we're trying to say now is, well, you're no longer at a point where you can do that. We have to, from a risk perspective, from a reputation perspective, from a moral obligation perspective, think about what those implications might be, because there could be a future where an end user, if having a bad experience from the use of your product, could sue you, could have that reverse accountability back to you. And those are the types of scenarios we're trying to get decision makers to think about. Unfortunately, most people don't make decisions because it's morally right. So we have to be able to show how understanding future implications and being prepared for it, even though it seems ridiculous now, is actually a risk management. It's a risk management process.
People say we don't have the money to do it now. We have to,
Yeah.
But you give them examples that it costs more if they don't do it, or?
Yeah, and I think we're living in a time of so many crises at the moment, right? Like, I mean, just in the last few years, it feels like every time you turn the news on, there's some other thing that's happening. It feels like we're on the brink of war right at this moment. I don't think leaders anymore have the luxury of just choosing to invest X in today. Leaders now have to find a way to invest into today and invest a little bit into tomorrow. And that proves to be a way of securing their ambitions, a way of securing their mandates, their strategies against any bad that can happen. And it's where even like 5 or 10 years ago, maybe we had the choice and it was a luxury to do it, but we're not anymore. So we've just got to be able to ensure that our budgets and our investments are managing the two.
And how do you do that? Do you always aim for the top leaders, or how do you work to make this common in a way?
I guess my work is often focused at senior decision makers. So it's really trying to get senior C-suite leadership or executives to understand the changing context we're in. So yeah, I mean, a lot of my work does focus on senior leadership. Absolutely.
I've seen you on stage. I understand why you should be into boardrooms and so on, but how do you pitch it? What do you say to the leaders? I have something important to say, and you give them 2 examples. So what do you do? How do you do it?
You often must come at this from the perspective that's important to the people you're working with, right? So what are their concerns? What are their problems? They are trying to protect against something. So you have to weave in these issues and to advocate in a way that links it to the issues that are also being experienced by those leaders. And you have to draw the line, you have to draw the dot to show that, if you are not thinking about this, this is why you should, because this is how it's going to impact on your bottom line at some point. And being prepared for it is what's needed at the moment.
So I guess, you have to find maybe an example that is close
Yeah.
enough to
And
the
so
ones.
you have to go in well prepared. You have to show them why it's relevant. You have to understand where they are coming from, what their pain points are too. Advocacy is not about beating people on the head, but it's about showing, building trust and holding people's trust in hands as you advocate for a different way of doing something. And there are always different pain points. I mean, there's different types of advocacy, of course, but to me, when you're trying to do policy advocacy and investment advocacy to do things differently, you have to understand what's important to your stakeholder group and show why it's relevant and important for them and how it would actually benefit them in the long term if they did something, in the way that we're trying to push it to.
Sorry, I have to go back to the biometrics a bit because I think that's a so, for me, understandable example, and and it's so overwhelming in our society, in most societies today, and the example of people erasing their data is very interesting. But how can we work with that? How can we help ourselves?
Think about what it is you're giving up. And for the most part, it's probably going to be okay. But being aware of how your data can be used against you and also how it's being used to sell you things. Do you remember when Pokemon Go suddenly became really popular? Was it 2018, something like that?
Yeah.
And we were all chasing the little Pokemons it was actually a way of tracking individuals. It was a marketing gig that marketing companies used to track movements of individuals and how quickly they would move from one space to another. And we didn't know that. We just thought, oh, this is a really cute. I mean, I was playing with it. I was in Geneva at the time, and it was really fun. But after that, I was like, wait, why did that happen? Why did we all suddenly chase it? And why, I was asking why. And then when you go and research it, you understand, oh, okay, that was actually why that came up. And it was a way of collecting our information.
Yeah, I didn't think about that either. I was like, this is cool, I have to get it.
Yeah. And not that it's bad. I'm not saying tech is bad. I'm a techie, but what I'm advocating for is the ethical use of it and understanding that not everybody is going to be able to access it in the same way. Not everybody is going to feel safe using it the same way. And therefore, when we design, we must design for all the different scenarios in our head.
I worked at a ticket office long ago, and I sold tickets for a concert, and we had to make them fill in their email address. And I said to this guy, here's your ticket, I want your email address. And he was like, what for? And I couldn't answer. I was like, well, we maybe will send you a proposal about, I don't want to leave my email address. And I was like, that was an eye-opener for me. Yeah, he understood that we would send him a lot of emails to start with.
Right. So, like often we give that up. I mean, I don't know about you, but I have a separate email account just when I'm, when one can buy something and someone asks me for a random email, I know I'm going to get junk mail. So I'll give them a separate email account.
I wonder which email I got. Yeah.
But we shouldn't have to do that. This is what informed consent becomes really important. Do people really understand what it is that they're signing up for and how it can be used? And I want to give another example as well. Like during COVID, when a lot of places were having those temperature check stands at the front of the store before you could go in. And it was designed with a particular, it's at a particular height. It stands in a particular way, right? So for most of us, we just go like that, and it scans our temperature. Now, a lot of that technology was then sent, to other countries all over the world. One of the really interesting things that happened that was noted was in Asian countries, Asian people, as they age, they actually get smaller and shorter. And this was designed in a way that was going for the average height. And so in some Asian countries, people had to lift up their grandmother or grandfather so that they could meet the height thing for the temperature check. Because it wasn't designed for, older people walking around that might be shorter than the average.
Oh, that's quite a story as well.
Yeah, but also it's not just in Asia, right? Like during COVID, like here in New York, and this was the same in every country. We had to register on the app to get groceries delivered, etc. It didn't account for how people may not be comfortable using smartphones if you don't speak the main language that the language being used in that app was. If you were scared to give up your information. And I know this happened in every country, mutual aid groups popped up entirely just to help people, whether it was older people, people with a disability, people that didn't speak English or were too scared or weren't really familiar with smartphones, just so that they could register to get the vaccination. And again, that's another example of this bad design. You haven't thought about every group of people, and then what that does is it puts the labor on volunteers, on civil society to step in and do that bandage repair. When you just think about, why don't we just design this better? Why don't we just be a little bit more intentional about who might be using this, and we're not putting labor and effort back onto civil society to do the repair work.
Want to lift your grandma up in the air? That should be the bottom line.
Yeah,
I think.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm curious, as I said before, what are you working with right now? Or if maybe it's secret, you could tell me what your thoughts are about these days.
Yeah, so I left the UN last September. I've set up my own practice now. We work in geopolitical intelligence and risk anticipation and foresight. So really trying to prepare institutions and governments to understand the different types of risks that are happening at the moment, particularly geopolitically and economic and social, and how to be prepared for this changing environment that we're in. So yeah, that's what I'm working on at the moment.
So you have a lot to do, I suppose.
Yeah, it's an interesting time.
Thank you very much for that we could chat for half an hour, and we are so happy that you will join us in Stockholm in May, the 24th. So hopefully you get there the day before, so we can have a chat, and then you will.
Yeah, I'll probably get there a few days before, and I hope to have a glass of wine with you. That'd be great.
Oh, that could be arranged, I think. Yeah, very nice to see you. Thank you.
Very nice to see you.
All the speakers for the conference have been announced. The last one was Oba Butler, the professional con man. Don't miss him. He is widely known for the great Amazon heist. You can still buy tickets for the conference, and you can also buy workshop tickets. There are 3 workshops. I can mention one of them. It's Design with AI with Krishnan. It's great. I know that for sure. And if you're really eager and want to gain exposure at the conference, you can become a partner. Just contact us and we'll look into that. Thank you very much and see you in May.